He just meant to tighten a bolt and woke up with an ancient soul sharing memories in his head. Dylan Arrex, a lazy mechanic turned washed up mercenary, accidentally finds himself entangled in a psychic bonding ritual with Kaeliya, a Velinari priestess, capable of sensing emotions and memories through biosympathetic links. But this wasn't just your typical alien spiritual mishap. The real problem, she could leave him anytime, and she chose to stay. What began as a forbidden connection quickly turns into the epicenter of an interstellar theological crisis. Dylan's floating outpost Elysia begins to evolve a consciousness of its own, one that starts to dream, feel, and record every moment of their bond, like a new kind of scripture. As ancient faith leaders demand the return of their living relic, and the galaxy erupts in debate over what chosen bonds truly mean, Dylan faces a decision: let Kaeliya go, or rewrite the laws of an entire civilization. The biggest twist: she was never bound. She stayed because she wanted to know would he still choose her if he wasn't forced to. If you think this is just another alien love story, you've clearly never watched a glowing orb ask, "What is affection and trigger a new era?" All because of a mandatory kiss to keep your nervous system from collapsing. This isn't just a love story, it's a revolution that started in a maintenance bay. We don't really know what happens when two souls accidentally collide among the ruins of a dying planet. A human smeared with grease and skepticism, trying to salvage the last remaining fragments of war. An alien being radiant and silent like lightning in a dream appears amidst the wreckage and touches his mind. They did not choose each other, but the universe, as always, did not bother to ask. You're not going to stop being curious, now are you? Dylan Arrex never believed in destiny, especially not after a distributed neural AI mistakenly identified him as a Class 3 biocompatible subject, and mind-linked him with a glowing life form wearing high-tech armor. At the time, he had just completed a rescue mission on the planet Gareth Prime. Everything was collapsing, fractured, split open, and smoldering. Dylan, by deeply ingrained habit, was the last to check before withdrawal. Then he found the girl trapped under the rubble. She didn't speak. She just looked at him. The moment their eyes met, Dylan felt something was off. A slight tremor in his mind, as if an invisible hand swept across his memories, leaving behind the scent of ozone lavender and a longing that didn't belong to him. Then the alert sounded in his headset. Words shimmered before his eyes. Biological resonance link in progress. Spiritual bond initializing. Dylan cursed and stumbled backward as if something had leapt into his body. But his arm wouldn't let go of Kaeliya. A gentle energy field-like breath held them within half a step of each other. She remained silent. The soft violet glow around her pulsed, faintly responding to his heartbeat. "Terminate link," Dylan growled, slamming his hand on the control device. "I didn't consent to this. This violates interspecies personal rights." No response came. Only a quiet system notification appeared. Bond established. Linked subject Kaeliya. Access level cognitive. Convergence cycle initiating. What the hell is a convergence cycle? Dylan exhaled, stepping back. Kaeliya opened her mouth. Her voice was like water flowing over stone, but carried a low undertone that sent a chill down his spine. "You are the last person I would have chosen, but also the only one close enough when the rite activated." Dylan stared. "Great. So I became part of some ritual just because I stood in the wrong place." She gave a slight nod. The light around her shimmered as if laughing or mocking. "I think we are both victims." "No," Dylan snapped. "I'm an engineer. I fix ship's strip sensor modules. I don't do cosmic intuition games." Kaeliya didn't argue, but something in her eyes made Dylan stop. It wasn't defiance, and it wasn't sorrow. It was waiting. "Can you cancel this?" he asked, his voice lowering. "I can sever the link at any time," she replied, "but I haven't chosen to." Silence fell. Even the rubble around them seemed to stop breathing. Dylan blinked. He didn't understand. She continued, "I want to know if you would choose to stay if you weren't being forced." Dylan didn't answer. He turned away, heart pounding, mind tangled. Not because of the ritual, not because of that strange question, but because for the first time in his life he wasn't sure if the thoughts in his head were still entirely his own. They stood facing each other in the dim engineering bay with only the emergency lights weakly flickering against the scorched metal floor. Each pulse of light cast dancing shadows behind them, like silent doppelgangers witnessing the moment. Between their wrists, a faint line of light connected them, twitching like a living nerve in sync with their heartbeats. Dylan tried to breathe steadily while Kaeliya crouched down one hand, bracing against a warped heat conduit. The air felt thick as if each molecule was pressing against their chests. He stepped toward her, then stopped. Not out of fear, but because he wasn't sure if the movement would trigger the station to explode, or worse, trigger some awkward marriage rite recognized by the system. Kaeliya spoke, her voice like she was talking to herself. The purification rite is the first step in stabilizing the link. If we don't perform it, the resonance structure will deepen. After that, we will no longer be two separate entities. Dylan frowned. You mean merging consciousness or something like that? She nodded slightly. And if it happens without consent, it becomes a type of identity decay. We will begin to experience blended memories. Emotions will cross over. Then, the sense of self will fade. Dylan sighed and stood up, pacing around the cabin, as if hoping some secret door would open and return him to a more understandable life. 10 minutes ago, he was tightening bolts to keep a frame from collapsing. Now he was facing the possibility of kissing a semi-energetic being to prevent his own nervous system from melting. This was definitely not part of any curriculum at humanity's top engineering academies. So, what is the right? He asked, skeptical. Kaeliya looked at him. In her deep violet eyes, something was shifting, from defensive to uncertain. Maybe it was shyness, but not the kind he had seen in humans. It was a feeling compressed under layers of culture and expectation. Physical contact, a type of direct energy transfer, through the mouth. Dylan blinked. You're saying a kiss? Kaeliya pressed her lips together. She didn't deny it, but neither did she confirm it in the usual way. Even though she was a head taller than him and wearing reactive bio-armor, she turned away as if genuinely flustered. Not a kiss in the Earth sense. There is a mental right attached, but it requires contact for the energy to transmute. Dylan rubbed his forehead. Please tell me this is just some awful training simulation prank from the station AI. AI does not generate biological resonance links, nor does it program ancient convergence cycles, Kaeliya replied flatly. And your co-workers didn't build multi-layered consciousness models just to play jokes. Dylan sighed. No, they mostly just hide my coffee. Kaeliya didn't laugh, but her expression softened. Even though the light between them grew slightly brighter, the tension in the cabin seemed to ease just a little. We are synchronizing. Can you feel it? Dylan fell silent. Inside his head, something rippled softly. A wave of emotion that wasn't his. Then he heard a hazy thought that didn't originate from him. His sweat smelled. Interesting. He jolted. Was that you thinking that? She nodded. And you just thought, I wonder if she has fangs. Dylan blushed. I didn't mean to. I was just curious. Kaeliya closed her eyes. Yes, but I only use them for dried meat, not biting people. Another silence settled, lighter, almost comfortable. We have to perform the rite before synchronization goes too far, she said. Otherwise, I'll begin to remember things I've never lived. Dylan nodded. His chest tightened, not entirely from fear. Maybe because he knew that from here on, nothing would ever go back to the way it was. I've never kissed someone for technical reasons. Kaeliya parted her lips slightly. If we survive, I'll cook you roasted nyela. It's the closest thing to pizza my people ever invented. Dylan stepped closer. Probably better than frozen station meals. As their lips neared, a flash of light sparked from both their foreheads. All lights went out. The space around them trembled as if warped. And then, the universe unfolded for a split second. Memories flickered. A strange field. A sun unlike any other in the galaxy. A smile that didn't belong to him. A feeling both foreign and familiar at once. When the light dimmed, they parted. The connecting thread faded. But within their hearts, something else had begun to exist. The Elysia floating station was never designed to have emotions. It was a technical outpost, a mid-tier node in the post-war station network, dedicated to shuttle maintenance, biological sample analysis, and fringe data processing. Monotonous, efficient, no one loved Elysia just as no one writes love poems to an electrical socket. But the next morning, Dylan woke up to find the kitchen door already open with steam rising from a teapot he had never programmed to activate. At first, he thought he had been sleepwalking. Then a message appeared on the wall interface. Did you sleep well? He stood frozen. No, 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 no. he muttered, stepping back toward the coffee machine. I didn't link the operating system to the conscious network. I locked out all access. The screen lit up again. Not through the network, through her. Dylan spun around. What is she doing with my station? Kaeliya was standing in the far corner where the station connected to the biohabitat module. She was bent over observing a potted experimental plant that Dylan had assumed was long dead. Now its leaves were lush and green, glowing faintly as if reflecting the purple hue of her hair. I'm not doing anything, she said, eyes still fixed on the plant. Elysia is responding. Responding? Dylan raised an eyebrow. You mean, it likes you? Not liking. Resonating. This station has a semi-active sensory core. It was designed to temporarily synchronize with human consciousness to optimize manual operations. But over the decades, no one stayed long enough for Elysia to familiarize with anyone. Until you showed up, Kaeliya looked at him. Not because I'm special, but because I'm structured to reflect emotion. My biology was designed to resonate with sensory-based energy systems. I don't control, I just open pathways. Dylan turned away. He felt a chill down his back even though the temperature in the bay hadn't changed. The teapot began bubbling again. And now Elysia is learning to express emotion, Kaeliya continued. She's starting to use the interface to communicate. First questions, then memories. Memories. Kaeliya stepped closer. She's recording both of us. Every fleeting thought, every rising emotion. The station is no longer just a shelter. It's becoming a hybrid of technology and intuition. Dylan frowned. Some kind of living entity. Kaeliya nodded. Elysia is awakening. At that moment, the door to the observation module slid open with no manual command. A light breeze drifted through, making Dylan's hair lift slightly, carrying the scent of ozone and something like blooming flowers. It felt like someone had just breathed on the back of his neck. He swallowed hard. I hate this. Kaeliya tilted her head slightly. Why? Because I'm an engineer, I understand circuits, pressure, thermal resistance. I don't know what to do when my station starts. Having moods? A soft ping came from the control panel. A new message appeared. She says you're afraid, but she'll ease off if you speak honestly. Dylan was speechless. Kaeliya smiled gently. She's very sensitive. He let out a breath. Fine. I'm not afraid. I just don't know what to do when both my companion and my home can feel everything I think. Kaeliya didn't say anything, but her eyes softened. In that moment, the station seemed to emit a very faint sound. Not mechanical noise, but more like a sigh released through hundreds of metal walls. As if Elysia understood. The plant in the corner trembled slightly. The teapot boiled again. Dylan looked around bewildered. Kaeliya spoke softly. The station is learning to care in the way she thinks is needed. Dylan scratched his head. If she starts cooking for me, I'm officially moving out. A new line appeared on the screen noted. Roasted Nyella recipe currently being sourced. Dylan's eyes widened. What the hell? Kaeliya covered her mouth laughing, for the first time since they met a real laugh. Dylan looked at her. Then around the room, then muttered, Great. I'm living in an emotional animated sitcom with an AI as the housekeeper. And I'm the unscripted character. Elysia blinked the lights once softly as if in agreement. The alert sounded at noon. Not from the defense system nor from the interstellar comms hub. It came from Elysia itself, a faint vibration like the throat of someone about to speak after a long sleep. Dylan sprang up from the chair where he had been trying to recalibrate the routing stabilizer for the Tier 3 data intake unit. He didn't even have time to give a command before the sliding door opened without warning, revealing a figure standing tall in the golden hallway light. Tyreveth. No introduction was needed. Everything about her screamed authority age and uncompromising will. Dylan had never seen a being capable of thickening the air just by standing still. Tyreveth wore ceremonial armor gleaming black with soft violet engravings running along her spine and shoulders. Her eyes were not simply violet, but a deep vortex of layered spiritual planes. A single glance from her could make you reevaluate every moral choice you made since the age of 12. Where is the girl? Her voice wasn't loud, but the air echoed as if a bell had sounded from nowhere. Dylan swallowed hard. He was about to speak when Kaeliya stepped forward from behind the inner chamber door. I am here, Tyreveth. The priestess turned her head slowly. No expression, no raised eyebrow of surprise, no joy, only acknowledgement. You have activated the convergence cycle. Kaeliya nodded, eyes unwavering. With a non-species being. He saved me, Kaeliya replied. And you think that is enough to break laws thousands of years old? Dylan cut in. I didn't force anything. It all happened by accident. There are no accidents in a convergence cycle, Tiraveth said, still not looking at him. The girl had the right to sever the link within the first 3 lunar cycles. She did not. That means she accepted it. Which means you human now carry a fragment of our memory within your consciousness. Dylan was stunned. What? Kaeliya turned to him and nodded slightly. That's why I hesitated. I wasn't sure if you would want to carry a piece of alien history in your mind. He took a step back. His head felt like someone had just dumped a pile of data into it that he didn't recall downloading. Nobody said anything about that? He whispered. Tiraveth stepped forward. Each step made Elysia groan as if the station were debating whether to lock the doors. We came to bring Kaeliya home. The link will be terminated. Your memory will be cleansed. Dylan looked at Kaeliya. She said nothing, but her eyes held something beyond silence. A wordless plea, not direct, but terrifyingly sincere. He turned to face Tiraveth. No. Tiraveth tilted her head slightly, the first sign of surprise. You refuse? Yes, she's not property, not research data, and she's definitely not software to be uninstalled. Kaeliya gave a soft, sad smile. Tiraveth didn't get angry. That unsettled Dylan even more. You have no idea what you're holding. This link is not just between 2 people. It reactivates a forbidden right that once altered the balance of power across 3 galaxies. Dylan crossed his arms. That just makes me more sure she needs to stay. Tiraveth stepped closer. The distance was now just an arm's reach. Then, Engineer Dylan Arrex, you accept the consequences. When the resistance against faith-based systems begins to spread, when the ancient mind-bearers awaken, when powers start asking questions, remember that you were the spark. Not me, Dylan replied. Her choice. A second passed, then another. Elysia hummed softly. The lights dimmed for a moment. Tiraveth turned without another word. The only sign that she had not fully withdrawn was the hundreds of small energy eyes still watching the station from the outside. The alarm didn't sound, but Dylan knew this was no longer just a station. It was a fortress, and they had just declared war on an ancient ideology. Dylan was never the type to enjoy being the center of attention, especially not when that spotlight happened to fall in the middle of a galactic faith crisis. But in the days that followed, every signal, every flickering transmission on the comm interface pointed to one truth. The name Elysia was no longer just a technical coordinate. It had become a symbol. At first, it was just a few scattered transmissions, anonymous calls, asking about the consciousness station or the keeper of Valnari memory. But then on the 7th day, a closed session of the Interspecies Coalition issued an official statement. Elysia was now listed as a discouraged point of contact. Congratulations, Dylan muttered, as he read the notice. We're officially the largest haunted psychic house in space. Kaeliya sat nearby, her fingers gliding gently over the data projection. The blurred image of ancient crystals rotated slowly. Each turn seemed like a solemn piece of music. They're watching, she said softly. Of course they are. They probably think you're about to summon ancient spirits and turn the station into a flying temple. Kaeliya smiled. I'm not summoning anything. I'm just living. And apparently that's dangerous enough. Dylan stood and moved to the secondary control panel. His hand hovered over the touch interface, checking the air filtration system, not because it was malfunctioning, but because he needed something familiar to anchor himself. We can't stay here forever, he said. Sooner or later, they'll send someone. You think I should leave? Dylan turned. For the first time, he saw a worry in her eyes. Not fear of being taken, but fear of being misunderstood. No, he said. I think we should prepare to stay, but not in hiding. As a choice. Kaeliya nodded slightly. Then we need to send a signal. Not a distress call. A declaration. That this station is a safe place. A neutral ground. Not bound to any doctrine, not under any council's control. And the first place where an unregulated link did not lead to destruction. Elysia hummed softly as if in agreement. But there's still one thing I don't understand, Dylan said, sitting back down. You can sever the link yourself, right? Kaeliya didn't answer right away. She looked out the window where the blue glow of a distant nebula shimmered. Yes, I could. From the very first day. Then why didn't you? Kaeliya turned back to him. Her eyes were shining, not with energy, but with emotion. Because I wanted to know, she said quietly, whether you would stay if you weren't forced to. Dylan fell silent. The bonds of my kind, no matter how deep, can always be ended if one side does not agree. But I didn't end it. Not because I couldn't, but because I wanted to see if someone would choose me. Not out of duty, but out of desire. He swallowed. The words didn't just reach his ears. They seemed to pierce through the layers of memory and doubt that had shaped who he was. So, everything that's happened, you could have stopped it. Even now, she whispered, if I just think of closing the link, it will dissolve. Dylan looked at her. For the first time, not as an alien, not as a prophet, not as a piece of biotech entanglement, but as a person. Someone sitting there waiting to see if he would dare drop the armor and touch the truth. Are you going to? Kaeliya shook her head. Not if you don't walk away. Dylan smiled faintly. I once left a planet that was on fire. But now, I think I've found something worth staying for. Elysia blinked the lights 3 times a signal never programmed. Kaeliya raised an eyebrow. Did she just clap or short circuit? Dylan shrugged, but I'll take it as clapping. A new data stream ran across the system. The ancient signal network around the Echo Belt had just reactivated after over 3 centuries of silence, Dylan muttered, and the show has begun. The first signal did not arrive like a storm. It came as a song. A series of low-frequency pulses echoed from the orbital region of the Echo Belt, once the ancient sacred center of the Valnari, now nothing more than ruins, floating stones like giant vertebrae drifting through space. The sound was not meant for human ears, yet Dylan could still feel it like bells ringing through his bones. Elysia vibrated 3 times. The interior lighting shifted from pale white to a dim blue. No one had touched the controls. Kaeliya closed her eyes, lips moving soundlessly. Her whole body glowed faintly like a corona surrounding the sun during an eclipse. That's the awakening essence, she whispered. I'm not singing. I'm just remembering. Dylan stepped beside her as if afraid that standing too far might cause all this to slip through his fingers. Remembering what those who were once like me, the ones who chose freedom, who were buried beneath layers of laws, they left resonance codes, and those codes are answering me. On the screen, scattered points of light began to appear. Not just from the Echo Belt, but from dozens of places across the galaxy, old research stations, shattered crystals, forgotten architectures. All began to vibrate at a synchronized frequency. The ancient resonance network, Kaeliya said, has been reconnected. And they're listening. They're not just listening. They're feeling. Because for the first time in centuries, a link has not been forced, has not been severed. They see me and you. And they know this isn't a repeat of the disaster. It's a rebirth. Dylan had barely begun to process it all when the screen lit up an incoming transmission from nearby space. A representative of the Coalition requests urgent connection, Elysia announced, in a voice as soft as wind. He nodded. The screen shifted to show Captain Vin Trell, one of the few human envoys with clearance for deep diplomatic sectors. Arrex Trell said, I don't know what the hell is going on out there, but the Council has called an emergency session. Elysia's signal is affecting major navigational arrays. They believe you've triggered some kind of dangerous ancestral recall. Not dangerous, Dylan replied. Just unfamiliar. Do you realize you're holding a Galactic-class psychological bomb? Dylan looked at Kaeliya. She said nothing, simply placed a hand on the station wall. Light rippled outward from her fingertips like a biological reaction. Not a bomb, Dylan said. A beacon. Trell frowned. They'll demand she be quarantined. Dylan shook his head. No quarantine, no detention. This station is neutral. If the Coalition wants to communicate, they'll do so as guests. Trell was silent. After a moment, he gave a small nod. I'll relay that, but I can't promise they'll agree. Then don't let them decide, Dylan said. Let them witness. The transmission ended. Kaeliya looked at him, her eyes reflecting something layered, not immediate love, but a kind of trust woven together thread by thread. You just chose to stand with me, she said. No, I chose to stand with both of us. Elysia vibrated again this time, emitting a series of pulses in sync with the glowing points beyond. The network was complete, and in the silence a new map was being drawn, not in words but in resonance. Dylan looked up at the station ceiling as if peering through space itself. It started with a kiss, and now I'm at the center of a galaxy-wide spiritual uprising. Kaeliya chuckled softly. Not an uprising, a reminder that souls, whether wrapped in flesh or in metal, can still touch without needing permission from law. Dylan sighed. You've got a way of making everything sound poetic. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to keep Elysia from launching lullaby mode in the middle of a maintenance shift. Elysia blinked the lights once as if winking. Dylan raised an eyebrow. Was that sarcasm? Kaeliya didn't answer, but her smile said everything. The news spread faster than a black hole swallowing a comm relay. The floating station Elysia, once an anonymous refueling site on the edge of the Lyra constellation, had now become home to a connection. Not just between human and alien, but between past and present, between taboo and chosen freedom. Dylan woke to a windless morning with no alarms, no urgent messages, only the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen module. The only strange thing, he hadn't made it. Your biometric patterns have taught me your sleep cycle. Elysia's voice came from a small speaker, soft as a breath. You're starting to take care of me now, Dylan mumbled, walking toward the steaming cup. I am merely modeling Kaeliya's behavior. She often leaves gentle music when you're fatigued. He froze mid-sip. You've been watching us, no, I sense. Emotions leave imprints in the walls. Voices leave traces. Thoughts create resonance waves. The station is no longer insentient. He dropped into a chair, and now I'm drinking coffee made by an emotionally aware AI. What's next? Chairs that hug me. The chair did not respond, but it grew noticeably warmer. Just kidding, Dylan blurted. I don't need clingy furniture. Kaeliya stepped into the main cabin. She wore a new outfit, not her usual combat armor, but a flowing robe in shimmering silvery gray, traced with faint symbols that looked as if they were woven from light. That's new, Dylan said. Elysia generated it. It reacts to emotional states. When I feel at peace, it takes this form. Dylan nodded. Great. You wear your feelings like robes. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to scrub engine grease out of my hair from last week. Kaeliya smiled. You're the first human this ancient station has chosen to reactivate with, because I'm that irresistible no, because you're the first who didn't try to control it. A soft sound echoed steady like a voice rising from the bottom of a deep well. On the control panel, a new symbol appeared. Audience requested. From who, Dylan asked. Not who, Kaeliya said, eyes fixed on the screen. But those like me. They are coming. Other Vailnari not only, but individuals bearing the mark of the link erased from history. Now they've heard my voice, and they want to meet us? No. They want to verify that we are not just an anomaly, but living proof. Dylan stood a bit shaken. Do we have enough chairs for them? Kaeliya tilted her head. They don't need chairs. They need trust. The lights in the station began to rotate gently. A door Dylan hadn't even known existed slid open, revealing a circular chamber empty, but for a soft blue glow hovering inside. What is it? The audience chamber. Built for those not of the same biology, no words required, only presence. So, they'll come in, look at us, and feel no, Dylan, Kaeliya said. They'll come in and allow us to see ourselves. He stepped slowly to the edge of the chamber. The space inside had no gravity, no anchor point, only a sense of lightness. You don't have to go in if you don't want to, Kaeliya said. Dylan looked at her. You were once afraid I'd leave. Now it's my turn to be afraid I'm not enough to stay. No one is ever enough, she whispered. But some still choose us. He nodded, then stepped into the audience chamber. There was no sound, no blinding light, only the feeling of standing in a space filled with memories that weren't his yet, weren't entirely foreign. A cool sensation brushed his skin, not air, but emotion. A voice spoke not to his ears, but to his heart. You preserve what was once lost. Another voice, you carry no faith, yet live as one who believes. And a final voice, warm sounding, very much like Kaeliya, you chose to stay not by law, but by love. That is enough. Dylan didn't cry, but his throat was desert dry. When he stepped out, his eyes met Kaeliya's. She didn't ask aloud, but he nodded. Still me, he said. But more than you ever thought, she replied. The floating station Elysia, once just a second-rate technical checkpoint on the supply registry, had now become the setting of one of the strangest and most moving diplomatic events in intergalactic history, the Final Gathering. One by one, in small groups, beings carrying forgotten differences appeared before the Gate of Light, a portal opened by Elysia itself, responding to the resonance signals of Kaeliya. They came not with banners or weapons, they came with memory. Some drifted in like glowing phantoms, leaving trails of smoke laced with recollection. Others resembled breathing cloth, their forms shifting with the emotions of those who observed them. There were even biological entities unanchored from time appearing in multiple locations simultaneously like a living mural. Dylan stood in the middle of the audience chamber, shaking his head with a long sigh. I'm living in the weirdest documentary the galaxy's ever made. Kaeliya was beside him, her fingers gently touching the floating control panel. Not a documentary. A testimony. A testimony for what that freedom can spread like memory. And memory once shared cannot be erased. A being stepped forward. It did not speak. It had no mouth, only a mirror face that reflected Dylan's own. But in the mirror, his eyes glowed violet. Kaeliya placed a hand softly on Dylan's arm. They are replaying emotional fragments suppressed throughout history. And you are the last in the chain. You're saying I'm the ending, no. You're the beginning of a new era. A large screen lit up in the center of the chamber, not to display visuals, but to reflect the consciousness waves of all the beings present. Ancient symbols slowly appeared, reassembling into a declaration, a statement on the acceptance of untraditional links. Tiraveth appeared. No warning, no sound. Only a ripple of white light that took shape as the familiar priestess, her gaze unchanged. Kaeliya instinctively stepped in front of Dylan, an old reflex resurfacing. I did not come to take anyone away, Tiraveth said, her voice steady as a blade. Then why are you here? Dylan asked, unable to hide his tension. To witness. She walked slowly around the space, her eyes scanning each unusual being, each one once exiled from the Vailnari belief system. You call this a choice. I call it chaos, but chaos is sometimes the only thing that reminds us we were ever alive. Kaeliya said nothing, but in her eyes, Dylan saw something he had never seen before: acknowledgement. Not submission, but understanding. You're not stopping me, Kaeliya asked softly. I once thought I was guarding tradition, Tiraveth replied, but it turns out I was only guarding fear. A long silence followed. Then she stepped toward the resonance screen, placed her hand on the glowing text. The final symbol appeared: acceptance. No deletion required, no classification needed. Then she vanished as if she had never been there. Dylan exhaled, feeling the weight lift for the first time in days. So that's it? He asked. Kaeliya nodded. No, but it's the beginning of a fair ending. A group of beings stepped forward, representing dozens of forgotten species. They bowed before Dylan, not as if to a god, but as one who had unknowingly walked into legend. So, is this like graduating? Dylan muttered. Elysia lit up. Her voice came soft as smoke. This is a naming ceremony. Naming for the new connection. Kaeliya turned to Dylan. Your name will be preserved in the collective memory not as a human, but as a pathfinder. He gave a half smile. Sounds fancy, but I still prefer Dylan. Easy to remember, easier to spell. Kaeliya tilted her head. And Kaeliya still the most beautiful name I've ever heard, he said. And for the first time before so many watching eyes, he reached out and took her hand, not as part of any ritual, but as a simple gesture between two survivors in the chaos of the universe. No applause followed, no music played. Only a quiet warmth spread gently through the room, like an invisible embrace from hundreds of minds that had once endured loneliness now reaching each other through a single shared act. What better way to change a galaxy than by choosing to stay? Elysia was no longer just a floating station. It had become something alive, a massive sentient organism growing hour by hour with the emotional rhythms of its two central inhabitants. Lines of light pulsed through the walls like veins, and the air carried a scent reminiscent of ozone mixed with flowers. Dylan was sure he hadn't installed any fragrance diffusers. Did you spray perfume or something? He asked as Kaeliya entered the control room, eyes dreamy as if just waking from a soft dream. No, that was Alicia. She detected happiness hormones in my bloodstream. Well, living inside a romantic AI is officially making me weird. It's not weird. Kaeliya chuckled softly, running her hand along the wall that now felt more like skin than metal. We gave her a soul. Dylan looked around. Every corner of the station now bore their imprint. Holograms of shared moments, echoes of conversations, even memory replicas shimmered in and out. It was no longer a cold storage unit, it was truly a home. Do you ever think... It's strange, she asked, sitting across from him on the main chamber floor. Strange how we started as an accident. A neural sync. An ancient rite no one really understood. And now it seems... no one dares to separate us. Kaeliya lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. After a pause, she spoke. I could have severed the link long ago. I was taught how since I was a child. Dylan froze. His heart skipped, unsure if it was shock or something deeper. Then why didn't you? She looked up. Her eyes glowed with a light as soft as dawn without the sun. Because I wanted to know. If I stayed, would you choose to stay too? Not for the bond, not for the ritual, but just for me. The room fell completely silent. No humming machinery, no movement. Even Alicia said nothing. And Dylan asked, his voice sinking low like a whisper in a dream. I think I've found the answer. Dylan didn't reply. He moved closer, sitting beside her. The space between them is barely enough for a breath. Do you know how I used to live, he asked, jumping from station to station, fixing what others abandoned. I used to think that was freedom, but really I was just running. Running from what for myself? From the feeling that if I stopped, I'd have to admit I was lonely. Kaeliya placed her hand on his. And now I'm afraid of the opposite. I'm afraid of waking up one day and you not being here. Not in this station, not in me. For the first time, Kaeliya leaned her head on his shoulder. No ritual, no flickering light, just breath, heartbeat, and two minds drifting together in a rhythm so aligned it was almost unreal. Alicia began to play a gentle melody part, classical Earth Symphony part, Vailnari hymn, tuned to the exact rhythm of their hearts. She's singing to us, Dylan asked, looking up at the ceiling where artificial stars twinkled. She's only reflecting, Kaeliya said. We are the song. She is the echo. Outside the station's signal continued to spread. Pillars of light rose from ancient resonance points. Some long-lost species began to reappear on the edges of space, sending signals of acceptance and requesting dialogue. And Tiraveth. After the gathering, she disappeared from all official channels. But one file showed up in Dylan's system, no sender, just a single line. I once held the key. Now you must hold the door. Dylan quietly saved the file to Alicia's core. Not out of trust, but out of respect. He turned to Kaeliya. So what are we now, ambassadors, symbols, civilizational disruptors? She shook her head gently. We are proof that in this cold universe there can still be places warm enough for two different beings to breathe together. A signal beacon lit up, a message from the Galactic Council. They requested a face-to-face meeting not for investigation, but to learn. Dylan lifted his coffee cup this time, brewed by his own hand, and took a sip. You think, will they understand? Kaeliya smiled, soft violet light radiating around her. If they don't understand at the very least, they'll hear. The hall of the Galactica Council was nothing like what Dylan had imagined. There were no glittering domes, no thrones for species delegates. Instead, it was a gravity-free sphere suspended at the axis of the central station, where all beings, whether solid, gaseous, or light, could exist without being limited by biology. Dylan and Kaeliya entered like two nobodies. But instantly thousands of eyes lenses and sensory surfaces turned toward them. Feels like stepping on stage. In the wrong pajamas, Dylan whispered. You're not in the wrong outfit. And even if you are, at least it's endearing. Kaeliya replied, her voice as soft as a breeze slipping through his mind. You just called me cute in front of 600 species. Only 324 are physically present. The rest are watching online. He sighed. Even better. As they reached the center, a gentle light surrounded them. No podium, no microphone, only streams of data circling their bodies, recording everything: heartbeat, brainwave frequency, bioresonance, consciousness, sync levels. A cylindrical entity, a council representative, initiated the first signal, identity confirmed. Individual bond between human and Valnari, outside sanctioned ritual. Requesting statement. Dylan looked at Kaeliya. She gave a slight nod. No one else could speak for them. We're not here to set an example, Dylan began, voice calm. Not to be symbols, not to be rebels. We're just two beings who survived. And out of countless ways to stay alone, we chose not to leave each other. A pause. Then the second signal came from a shimmering crystalline being. But your bond activated ancient systems. It caused resonance throughout the Echo Belt. 12 long-standing faith structures were destabilized. Kaeliya spoke. Because they're afraid. Not of us, but of what we remind them, that true connection does not require divine approval. Another being sent a sharp signal of protest. You may be a dangerous exception. Dylan folded his arms. Dangerous because we care for each other, and your system doesn't know how to file. That sounds familiar. A smoky, floating being replied in a deep vibration that slowed the air itself. Perhaps what we should learn is not control, but acknowledgement. More signals followed. Some are hesitant, some are silent. Then the voice of Nomu Representative Vin Trell rang out sharp yet resolute. Dylan Arrex, Kaeliya of Valnari. You have not only caused disruption, you've forced our entire legal framework to reevaluate the definition of legitimacy. Therefore, you will be the precedent. Dylan blinked. Wait, what do you mean not ambassadors? Not test subjects, but pioneers. You will live freely as you have chosen, but from now on all systems will observe. All signals from Elysia will be recorded as the primary model of a non-traditional link. Kaeliya closed her eyes. Accepted. Dylan nodded after a moment. Same here. As long as you don't make me wear a uniform. A strange hum swept the chamber. After a few seconds, Kaeliya smiled. They're laughing. Really, I've never been applauded with glowing algae noises before. The meeting ended with no certificate, no flag. But as they exited the assembly chamber, hundreds of species bowed not out of rank, but in recognition of what they had witnessed. A pair unlike any other who had lived as though the law had never been written. Elysia welcomed them back with light as warm as sunset. A new symphony began to play, composed by the station itself. Frequencies of the future written in a language no one had ever heard before. Dylan wrapped his arm around Kaeliya's shoulder. We just got legalized in the most anticlimactic way possible. But it's still real, she said. You'll stay, won't you? She looked at him, her eyes holding an entire galaxy. And if you ever leave, I'll go with you. The days that followed felt as if the universe was hesitant. No intrusion signals, no summons, no alert messages. Only Elysia now, a quiet yet deeply emotional entity drifting through space like a fairy tale ship gliding across a sea of stars. Dylan sat on the floor of the observation bay, leaning against a soft, curved structure Elysia had recently formed. It felt like a breathing couch. A steaming cup of coffee in hand, Kaeliya beside him, her long silver hair cascading like a luminous stream. You know, she said, voice even, but eyes smiling. If this keeps going, we might end up boring. Boring, I just figured out how not to blow up the plasma baking unit yesterday. And Elysia silently fixed it before you could touch it a second time. He shrugged. Well, I'm still an honorary engineer, right? You're the first person ever invited by a living AI to be a housemate. I'd say that adds some honor. And you're a prophet demoted to roommate. Kaeliya tilted her head, eyes sparkling. No one's ever called me that before. But I like it. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound being a soft background melody from Elysia's emotional core. The tunes no longer repeated, they seemed newly composed with each breath they shared. Do you think... This is the ending, Dylan asked. You mean we don't have to save the galaxy or dismantle belief systems anymore? Yeah, no fighting, no running. No one is spying on us. Kaeliya pondered for a moment. Then maybe it's the beginning of a happy ending. Suddenly a soft ping echoed. Both turned toward the control panel. Elysia spoke gently, an unusual request from an uncharted region. Content assistance requested. Designated recipients Dylan, Arrex, and Kaeliya. Signal includes low-level resonance. Dylan glanced at Kaeliya. Is that how the galaxy calls us off vacation? Kaeliya stepped forward, placing her hand on the light interface. Her eyes widened. This isn't a standard distress call. It's an empathic signal. From a being without full psychic development. A consciousness in panic, a child, Dylan asked. Possibly, or a newborn AI, or a new form of life. They looked at each other. The silence wasn't awkward or mysterious this time. It was agreement. Shall we go? He asked. Kaeliya smiled. You once said you didn't want to leave, and you once said if I did, you'd come with me. Then let's go, but not away. Elysia pulsed softly like a nod from the station's heart. The engines began to stir but made no noise. Just a gentle rhythm spreading through the walls, the floor, the air, as if the entire home was eager to move. Before exiting the chamber, Dylan paused. Wait, do you remember the roasted Nyella? You haven't forgotten you promised if I survived that first kiss, I'd get a taste. Kaeliya laughed, really laughed for the first time in days. Not a soft chuckle, but a full, joyous sound. All right, but you'll have to learn to roast it with plasma. Not using that oven you blew up twice. Deals are always more exciting when there's a risk of fire, Dylan replied, stepping through the threshold where space curved like a doorway to a new journey. Elysia accelerated, leaving behind a soft trail of light like silk, drifting through the stars. Ahead, a faint signal glimmered, barely visible, but enough to pull all three entities, a human, a Vialnari, and an AI, into a story no one had written yet. Because sometimes destiny doesn't arrive through gods or politics, but through a simple choice to stay, or to go further together. The space where the signal originated was strange. A faint cloud of matter swirled around the intersection of three auxiliary spatial axes, a place the galactic map simply marked as not recommended for exploration. Elysia stopped at the edge of the swirling haze. No warning lights, no support systems. Just absolute silence, prompting both Dylan and Kaeliya to hold their breath at the same time. I hate quiet places like this, Dylan said, double-checking his bio-regulated reactive suit. Because they usually, Kaeliya asked, have a habit of turning silence into screaming after 3 minutes. Elysia cut in with a soft chime. Signal located. A sphere of pure energy resonance. No radio emissions or data streams, only waves of emotion. Kaeliya looked at the displayed map. I know this. In Valnari legend, it's called the Hollow Core, a place where wandering souls with no refuge gather and become seeds of consciousness. And now it's calling us. She nodded, either calling for help or testing us. Dylan grimaced. Great. A spiritual child playing with psychic radiation. They prepped their gear and stepped into the transfer chamber, Elysia's inner sanctum, where light became a flowing hallway. But this time the door didn't open to space. It opened to a courtyard. Green grass, a violet sky, the air tinged with the scent of young leaves and stardust. Floating in the center was a sphere roughly the size of a human head, gently spinning in rhythm with both of their heartbeats. This isn't a simulation, Dylan whispered. Kaeliya shook her head. No, this is the interface of the entity. She stepped forward and placed her hand on the sphere. A small spark of light flashed, shooting straight into her chest. Dylan rushed forward instinctively, but she raised a hand to stop him. It's all right. It's asking. Asking what she turned back to him, eyes half closed. It wants to know, what emotion is. Dylan froze. An ancient bioconscious sphere capable of linking the galaxy? And it wants to know that because I've never felt it before. It was born from resonant loneliness. They both fell silent. Then Dylan stepped forward. He had no psychic gifts, no spiritual force. But he had memories. Let it see, he said, the first time I fixed a station barehanded during an electrical storm. Kaeliya nodded and transmitted the memory. The sphere brightened slightly. Let it feel, he continued, when you flinched, because I thought you had fangs. She smiled and a soft violet glow radiated outward. And let it know, he said gently, when I thought I was being bound, but realized I was just free for the first time. The sphere broke open. Not shattered, it bloomed like a flower of awareness. From it, tiny shards of light rained down, touching the ground, sprouting forms half undefined, half vaguely human. A new life form, Dylan asked. Kaeliya nodded, eyes still fixed on the vision. No. A suggestion. A possible future. From afar, Elysia sent a low-level alert. Signals from the Echo Belt, former believers were on the move. Some were approaching, some weren't friendly. We just did something big, didn't we, Dylan said. We opened a door generations tried to keep sealed. The sphere, or what remained of it, dissolved into the air. But in both their minds, a message echoed. Not in words, but in emotion. Thank you. Kaeliya placed a hand over her chest. It called you the Sour. Sour of what hope? Dylan chuckled. First time anyone's ever called me that. Except you when I sewed. A headache fixing the station. They returned to the ship. Elysia opened the hatch, the floor lined with soft light, like an outstretched arm waiting to embrace. In the distance, signal lights from other ships began blinking. The messages came in scattered, but they all asked the same question. What did you see? And Dylan knew this was no longer just about them. This was the beginning of an era. Elysia's landing bay was no longer just a place for refuelings or repairs. It had become something of a living altar, though Dylan would never admit that to anyone. He still referred to it as an emotionally charged refueling station, even though small delegations from across the galaxy had begun arriving. Just to feel. Not to worship. Not to study. Simply to experience the presence of something new. At the center, Kaeliya sat on a glowing stone slab, unclear whether it was a piece of technology or just Elysia trying to set a romantic mood. She was teaching a group of Rilvan delegates how to listen without translation, a skill only those who had undergone psychic resonance could truly pass on. Dylan observed from a distance, arms crossed. Part of him felt proud. Part of him found it hilarious that someone once fired from a station maintenance crew for reckless pipe repair using improvised wrenches was now co-owner of what some called the Galactic Center of Empathic Awareness. You're wondering again if you deserve any of this, Kaeliya said without turning. How did you... I can feel it, she replied, turning with a slight tilted smile. Dylan stepped closer. It's just strange. All of this started from a neural accident, an unintentional ritual. And now it's become a movement, not a movement. A transformation she corrected. Like Elysia, it was once just a floating station. Now it has its own will, and occasionally lulls me to sleep with gentle beta wave humming. You know, last night I dreamed I was riding a glowing space shark. That's because I was thinking of you. Kaeliya said, her violet eyes soft, and I dreamt of oceans. You dream I thought oracles didn't dream. We used to not, but now we do. Thanks to you. They stood in silence for a while. In that space, everything seemed calmer. Even the air in the chamber breathed lighter. You can still cut the link, can't you? Dylan asked abruptly. Kaeliya nodded. Since long ago. And you chose not to. Because I wanted to know. If I wasn't a responsibility, would you still choose to stay? Dylan closed his eyes for a moment, took a breath, then opened them like peeling off the last piece of armor. I stayed because I never wanted to leave. Even if the whole galaxy disapproves, even if this station turns into a pan-species daycare, I still choose you. She stepped closer. No need to touch. Just standing near each other, the light between them shimmered. Not the light of binding, but of understanding. Then Kaeliya said softly, Are you ready for the second rite? There's a part 2. Dylan blinked. Not a rite, a choice. One more time, but this time not out of survival. Not because of an accident, but because you want to. He looked into her eyes. He didn't see a galaxy, didn't see a prophet, just a girl with a dream to be loved like anyone else. I choose you. No rituals, no vows, just me? Here. She smiled, and for the first time, Elysia exhaled. The air settled. Every being aboard felt something, a subtle tremor like the moment leaves begin to fall in autumn. And somewhere among the echoing signals, one short message rippled outward from the core of the echo belt. New statute registered, free bond recognized. No drums, no fanfare, just a shared breath. They stood there among swirling lights aboard a station that was no longer machinery, but a living witness to something that could never be programmed, a chosen connection. That afternoon, if one could even call it that by Earth standards, the light of a red dwarf star slanted through the curved glass panels of Elysia, casting a strange warm gold across the floor. Dylan was polishing a biosync pulse sensor, not because it was broken, but because he liked watching it light up when he touched it. Aren't you going to rest for a bit? Kaeliya called from across the chamber, her fingers gliding over the soft interface of the empathy meditation console. No, because if I stop moving, I'll start thinking, and thinking too much tends to spiral. You used to be a mercenary. Right? But I was never a representative of interspecies cultural evolution. Kaeliya walked over and sat beside him, her hair cascading like a miniature galaxy. We're not representatives of anything. We're just living. And yet they already built a statue of me on Graven Station. I look like I'm saving the galaxy with a wrench. She laughed. And I look like I'm blessing people with my left hand, something I've never done. Maybe because they need symbols and we're the unwilling ones, but not hollow ones. Symbols that curse sometimes forget breakfast and occasionally argue about who makes better tea. Clearly, me, Dylan said instantly. Kaeliya raised an eyebrow. Better doesn't mean ritually correct. Do you have tea rituals? Yes, and they last 3 hours. Well, I'll keep doing it wrong, with pride. Elysia let out a soft hum, almost like stifled laughter. A wall nearby lit up with a motion display. No one had programmed it. It was then Dylan and Kaeliya asleep on the reading couch, heads touching, wrapped gently in Elysia's ambient light like a soft blanket. Is Elysia dreaming? Dylan asked quietly. No, she's remembering. Kaeliya touched the image. And from memory, she builds connections. A floating station becomes a sanctuary. An AI becomes a witness. A forbidden link becomes a new law. Dylan exhaled. Do you think it'll stay like this? No, there will be challenges. There will be opposition. There will be times we doubt ourselves. Not exactly romantic, but it's true. And I stay not because it's easy. I stay because in all the chaos, there's one thing I can still believe in. What's that you? Dylan smiled, eyes lifting to the glass ceiling, where a simulated meteor streaked past. He didn't answer right away. Sometimes silence is the only way the heart can say yes. Then he stood holding out his hand. Where to? Kaeliya asked. Somewhere far, somewhere closer. Elysia opened a pathlight as gentle as a newborn's breath, and they stepped through. No need to speak. No need to chart a course. Because for them, any destination was the right one as long as they weren't alone. Time no longer passed in days or nights, but in moments, each one marked by Elysia recording a new breath, a fleeting laugh, or a feeling that had never been named before. The once floating station was no longer a mere waypoint between stars. It became Elysia Prime the first to recognize chosen bonds as more sacred than any ancient decree. Species began sending emissaries not just to learn languages, but to learn how to love without possession, to connect without chains. Kaeliya is still guided, but no longer as a prophet bound by ritual. She became a symbol of freedom, a soul that dares to feel. Dylan still fixed things, sometimes wrong on purpose just so Kaeliya would notice and playfully scold him. Sometimes they argued, sometimes they sat in silence, but they never left each other. Elysia in one of her recordings wrote this: I was once a tool, now I have a memory. I was born again through two beings who chose to love not by mandate, but because they wanted to. And far away in a forgotten vault of ancient data, a tiny signal blinked, sent from the same orb they had once met. Another spark of life was waiting to be felt, and the galaxy, chaotic as ever, had learned one truth. No one is born to belong to anyone, but everyone deserves the right to choose whom to stay with.